Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Rays Rewind with Bell, Bushman, and Drew.
Jansen. That is into center field. Here comes Kiermaier. Phillips has tied the game. Arose Arena coming around. Throw home. Now he stumbles. But the ball gets away. Tampa Bay wins it. Brett Phillips, Game 4 hero.
The sickest Tampa Bay Rays podcast. It's gonna be sick.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rays Rewind podcast. My name is Drew Lang. I am here on a early Thursday morning, trying to wrap my head around last night's performance against the Chicago White Sox. And so we're going to get into that and a few things with the team at the trade deadline and kind of just talk about where we're at right now with the Rays. So thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe our YouTube page, Rays Rewind, with the Sick Media Network. And yeah, just let's get into it. I find myself doing this again for this second straight year. I went back and looked. So my co-host Evan is out on a work trip this week. He's gone all week, and so with the off day, just wanted to get some thoughts out there about the White Sox series and considering what happened. And it was funny because I looked back, and last year the Rays, as we all know, were swept by the White Sox in Chicago earlier in the season, like end of April, beginning of May, end of April. Were swept by the White Sox, and we kind of know in hindsight that was, really the low point of the year. And I looked back at our YouTube page and the episode for that series. I was also solo potting. And somehow I ranted for about 45 minutes on the Rays being swept by the White Sox. And last year, the White Sox were at that time, I think, 3-22, just an absolutely abysmal team. That didn't stop them from sweeping the Rays last year. And then this year, we find ourselves as Rays fans lamenting another series loss to the White Sox. They're not the worst team in baseball, but they're close, and they are the worst team in the American League. If we want to look at the current standings, let's see just how close to the bottom they are. The Rockies have a pretty good hold on that this year, but let's see. They are they got an 11-game lead, a 10.5-game lead on the Colorado Rockies, but they have a stranglehold as the second worst team in baseball and the worst team in the American League. So once again, the Rays managed to not perform in these series against the lowly teams of the major leagues. We've kind of seen that be a theme this year. Just looking at the standings off the top of my head, they've played the Rockies, White Sox, Athletics, Pirates. Those are 4 of the bottom 5 teams. They play the Nationals at the end of August, and they've either lost the series or only won 2 of 3. Now you could look at a few things, right? At the Rockies, they weren't quite the Rockies yet, right? It was the opening weekend of the season. So I don't think, and people knew they were going to be bad, but I don't know if people knew they were going to be this bad. But taking 2 of 3 from them, they've lost 2 of 3 to the White Sox. They lost 2 of 3 to the Athletics. By the way, both of those series, Athletics and White Sox, were at home already, and then they won 2 of 3 against the Pirates and lost the one game to Paul Skeens, which I guess you can tip your cap to. It's kind of whatever. And then the Orioles, they've really not taken advantage of an Orioles team that's underperforming this year. I believe the season series just again they split the 4-game loss. Yeah, so they are, I think, tied up with the Orioles, 500 against the Orioles this year, just based on the 3 series they've played. So it just really underperforming against these teams that are at the bottom of the barrel in the major leagues. And I think they said on the broadcast the other night, and this was a couple nights ago, so I guess maybe it's 23 and 23, or maybe 22 and 22. It might be 22 and 23 at this point with last night's loss, but against teams under 500 this year, they are 22 and 22, or right around 500 as a record, and that's just not acceptable for a team that, a month ago we were talking as a playoff shoe in the wild card, with multiple games up as the first wild card team, and essentially a half game back of the division. And now, I mean, the division is, I don't think you get to convince any Rays fan that they're going to be competing for a division title. And the wild card is slowly slipping out of their grasp. So let's get into last night's game. I don't think it's hyperbole to say this is the worst loss of the season. When you consider the importance of this series, we've talked about this on the podcast a few different times. Coming out of the break, this 9-game stretch before your 4-game in New York was as important of a 9-game stretch as you could have in the season. And then even within this 9 games, the 6 games at home were even more important. He had a 6-game home stretch here to open out of the break against 2 last place teams, one being the White Sox, as we mentioned, who are the worst team in the American League, and the Orioles, which, again, I realize, and I've said this before, like, I don't look at the Orioles like I do other last place teams, because they still have a lot of the same names that were there when they, especially in their lineup, where they were competing for a division and in the playoffs. Their pitching's been lackluster, but they still got the names in the lineup. It just, for some reason, hasn't clicked this year. Injuries have played a part, obviously, and just not the high-end pitching talent they had in years prior with Corbin Burns and others, Grayson Rodriguez. But so it's still a tough team in the Orioles, but you look at a 3-game series at home against them, where they're struggling a lot this year, and those 6 games against the Orioles and White Sox you got to have them. You don't have to win all of them, but you need to go 4-2 at minimum, 5-1. Maybe you get a sweep in there somewhere. You're thinking against the White Sox probably out of the 2. So with all of that as the context going into this series against the White Sox and into last night's game, you get the 2-3 against the Orioles. I don't think anyone's going to complain about that. And then you drop the first game against the White Sox, just uncompetitive. Shane Baz just, I realized he had some, hits, kind of bloop hits, and the 3-run homer was a Steinbrenner special and is a home run only in that park. And I get it, it's bad luck, whatever, but they scored 8 runs on the Rays. I don't think that it was a fluke. I mean, they just completely outplayed the Rays. And the Rays didn't take advantage of their opportunities. So they put themselves in an 0-1 hole for the series. One sec. Sorry, it's early in the morning. I had to get my coffee in this morning. So, but you put yourself in an 0-1 hole. And then, they come back yesterday or 2 days ago, against the White Sox, 4-3. You don't convince anyone. It wasn't an authoritative win by any means, but at least you get the win. You take it any way you can get it. And then yesterday, it's all right, this is a must-win game. I in terms of just the vibes going into the road trip here in Cincinnati, New York, you've got the other wild card teams ahead of you, the Red Sox and the Mariners, playing 2 really good teams in the Brewers and Phillies, and so you're hoping with the Rays taking care of business in the White Sox game, maybe winning the series, they can get a game. You thought the chances of maybe the Rays even going into the road trip as a playoff team, a half game up on the Red Sox, assuming they lost last night against Philly, were pretty good. And the Rays come out smoking the ball in the first inning, 4-0. And then, I mean, just, you kind of feel like they're cruising to a win here. And the White Sox pitcher, Cannon, I mean, he hasn't inspired any confidence in anybody this year. He's got an ERA in the high 4s going into last night, or in the 4s going into last night, I think. And it's just, you think it's right there. You're up 4-0 in the first. Taj looked good, and then it just implodes. I mean, as quickly as one can implode on a game. The I don't know if Taj got an out before he gave up the 4 runs. I'd have to go back and look, but just couldn't fool anybody. And they talked about it after the game. He was really relying on 2 pitches, which as a starter, you can't have 2 pitches because it's just not going to work over the course of a game. These guys are going to figure you out and, be able to wait on certain pitches and jump on it. And so just the way the game unfolded, I mean, the Rays had multiple leads in that game of multiple runs, some as high as 4 runs at a time. And just for them to come in and the importance of that game against a bad team, and I get they've got some young guys that they're bringing up for their future that are, they're unknowns, right? Like Colson Montgomery, Kyle Teal, the shortstop Chase Madroth. I'm probably butchering his name. They've got these young guys that they're playing, and they could be really good, right? Like, and they certainly look great in this series. But it's still a bad team for a reason. It's not like these guys just decided to wake up and play today. I mean, they're a bad team even with these guys on the roster. And they might not be that moving forward or next year. They might be better next year as these guys improve. But like right now, they are a bad team. They were 30 games under 500. And that doesn't happen by mistake. And just for the Rays to implode the way they did against this AL worst White Sox team is the most disheartening, easily the worst loss of the season. It's just embarrassing. Much like the sweep was last year in Chicago. It's just embarrassing for the Rays team and for Rays fans because the fall that they've had over the last 3 weeks has been just it's tough to describe. And now, you're looking at the standings, and they're a game and a half out of the third place wild card. And teams like the Rangers and the Guardians have been winning. They've been winning the series that they need to win against teams that aren't good. And as a result, they are now they're breathing down your neck. So it's not even just the Rays having to worry about the teams in front of them, but now they're tied with the Rangers in the wild card. And I believe, even though the season series is tied with the Rangers because there was 2 sweeps there, alternating sweeps, I believe the tiebreaker is the interdivision record, I think. I'd have to double check that, but like I'm pretty sure the Rangers currently have the tiebreaker over the Rays. So technically they're behind the Rangers. You have the Guardians a game back of the Rays. So now it's not even about the teams in front of you, but now you got to worry about the 2 or 3 teams that are sneaking up behind you or that are right there with you. And that's the mess of the wild card. And that's the situation the Rays have put themselves in because they can't perform against these teams in last place. You get to the 8th. I mean, I actually didn't even see Kevin Kelly's implosion in real time because while I had been watching the game, I thought, in the 7th, I was like, all right, I need to, go get a shower and start kind of winding down, getting ready for bed and all that. So I thought that was a good time, just kind of didn't really expect much to happen. And I get back in front of the TV to see what the score is, and it's not only have they squandered the lead, but it's 11-7. They've given up 6 runs and they have 1 out. So I actually missed all of Kevin Kelly's implosion, which I would have thought would have been hard to do, but it happened so fast that hey, that was shocking to say the least. I think it's clear. I went back and watched it. He didn't have. I mean, he's looked terrible. Kevin Kelly, he has been so good in the past. Beginning of this year, last year. I'm pulling up his baseball reference page right now. Let's see. I mean, last year he had a 2.67 ERA. His FIP was a little higher at 3.27. But his strikeouts, I mean, he had 8 strikeouts per 9. Walk rate was 1.1 per 9. This year, his strikeouts are way down, 6.6. His walks are up at 1.5. He's having an awful year. And then we look at the splits for this season, and I know he had that injury. He had the glute injury, a glute strain or something like that. Um, but we look at his July. So he was dominant in April and March, just 5 games, but looked like his normal self. May, he played 1 game. It did not go well. June was much better. It looks like 2.75 batting average against. His ERA was 2.45 over 11 games, 11 innings pitched, 9 strikeouts, a whip of 1. You would take that any day. July's just been so much different for him, though. He's had 8 games in July. He has given up 10 runs in 7.2 innings. So Kevin Kelly's he's been atrocious in the month of July, and last night was no different. I mean, he just had nothing from the start. The air didn't help by Caballero, but I don't know if that I don't know what that makes the game look like. I think you're still gonna have some runs come across even with that out added on if Cabby makes a play there. And so I think the most frustrating thing for me is that you know um, Cash just sat there. The importance of that game, again, we've gone over it a number of times, and I don't know how you don't have double barrel action going in the bullpen. You get Kevin Kelly going, um, warming up obviously to come in for the eighth. That's your preferred option. You need a lefty in there. You need somebody else in there, like a Ian Seymour, especially if Ian Seymour needs a little bit more time. Like, he's not a bullpen arm by trade, right? He's been a starter most of the year, all year in the minors, and then he's pitched multiple innings here in Durham, or excuse me, here in Tampa. I maybe he needs a little bit more time, but I don't know how you don't have somebody warming up alongside Kevin Kelly or right as the inning's starting, just in case things get bad, because we've obviously seen Kevin Kelly perform terribly this month. And it's just one of those things that, like, is Kevin Cash asleep at the wheel? What is, and that's the biggest thing is, like, Cash as a manager, he's a great manager, one of the best, right? We know all the things. He's the most tenured manager in baseball, and there's just all these things you can say about him. He's 2 or 3-time manager of the year. But the bullpen management has always been, it seems like whenever things are going bad for him, it's always the bullpen management. We look back at the stretch before the All-Star break. He pushed all the wrong buttons with the bullpen. It felt like every guy he brought in, every time he brought in Edwin Uceta, every time he brought in Kevin Kelly, Garrett Clevenger, even, like Pete Fairbanks. I mean, not that you don't bring him in the ninth against the Red Sox, but it just went poorly. It went terribly. And again, the bullpen management is just crazy to me, in a game that's so important. And I get it's the White Sox, and you're not necessarily expecting them to explode for 6 runs there in the eighth, but you got to have this win. Like, there's got to be more urgency in how he handles the bullpen. So I don't know how you don't have somebody else warming up just in case, because you're going to Pete Fairbanks in the ninth regardless. So just warm up a guy, have somebody ready in case Kelly can't get anything done. I mean, we look at his last few games. He's got, in July, he's had 8 games in July. He had a couple, shutout innings, shutout performances, in his inning or inning and a third there against Detroit and Boston before the All-Star break. But, he didn't look great against the Orioles in a low leverage situation. He certainly, he looked good the other day against the White Sox in the loss, but, like, it was obvious he just didn't have it. I mean, they were either seeing everything well, he was missing the zone, and got hit hard. And so for Cash to sit there and just wait, and get him after he's given up 5 runs, and then eventually a 6th after he got taken out, I don't understand the waiting there, the non-urgency. That was probably the most frustrating part of it. And I don't know. Cash says after the game, he's got all the confidence in the world. He says all the same things, right? We hear this all the time from him. Anytime somebody performs poorly, it's all the confidence in him in that moment. Just wasn't executing, or just a bad night, whatever. Like, gonna put him out there again. Like, always confident. This guy's never gonna be emotional about it. He's never gonna throw a guy under the bus, but there just seemed to be no urgency in the way he managed that inning. And for the Rays in the position they're in right now, and knowing that they really needed this win, it's really disappointing. And it's easily the worst loss of this season, in my opinion. And now they got an off day to think about it and head on the road for a 7-game stretch against the Reds and the Yankees, and then they're back home for 3 against the Dodgers, and then there's that long 4-city West Coast trip that they've got to take to start on August 4th, and that's the road trip we've been talking about all season. So it's time to put up or shut up for the Rays. It could either go really badly, and we could be sitting here saying the Chicago White Sox series was the turning point for them. Hopefully they pull a performance out like they did earlier in the year, where looking back, they had that West Coast trip against the Diamondbacks and the Padres, and going into that road trip, things didn't look good, right? They lost, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 6, excuse me. They had lost 6 of 8. Excuse me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of 7 at home the week prior to going on the road in April to Arizona and San Diego. They had lost 5 of 7 to Boston and New York, and were 4 games under 500. And they dropped the first game in Arizona, but then they rallied to win the series in extras on both games following, and then they swept the Padres at home, or in San Diego, to get back to 500, when a time when I think San Diego was like 13-1 at home. So they've done this before, where they've gone out and really surprised people. Not really expecting much, especially the performance prior has been really disappointing. But now they're kind of in the same boat, right? They go out there and I don't think people have too high expectations of what this series in Cincinnati or New York is going to look like. I don't think anyone's expecting them to go out and win 5 of 7 here. You hope they do, but they've showed us in the past that they're able to take some bad situations like they put themselves in, and go out and overperform, or outperform expectations. So we'll see what they end up doing there in Cincinnati starting on Friday, and then against New York and leading up to the trade deadline. One thing I did want to talk about starting pitching woes, and I'll just touch on this briefly, is the starting pitching woes to start the second half. This is something that we really haven't talked about all season, because the starting pitchers for the Rays have been so consistent. We know about the starts that they've made, right? Like I think they're the only team. Maybe there's one other team. I remember hearing this at some point around the All-Star break, but to have every pitcher make their start. They've had no injuries. They've had 0 injuries to the rotation, which for the Rays, as we know in recent memory, that they've certainly had their fair share and more over the last few years. So it was almost like it was going to a positive regression on that front was bound to happen. But I mean, it's almost unheard of to go through an entire 100 plus games of the season without a single injury to a Rays starting pitcher. Outside of that one start Joe Boyle made in Atlanta, or against Atlanta, they had every starter had made their start, and it's been great. And for the most part, I mean, they haven't had a guy go out there and be like a Cy Young contender or anything, but I mean, they've been consistent. They've had their moments, ups and downs at times, but as a staff, they have been very consistent all year. It's never been, I think, an area that people were concerned about, or honestly, we just keep talking about their depth that they have, and who they could trade away potentially to get something back in return at a position of need, because they have such great depth at the pitching rotation. And a lot of that's because Zach Littell's going out and eating innings and giving you solid performances, 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5 starts. Taj has been up and down. Obviously, he's been sent down after yesterday's debacle, but he's giving you some flashes. Shane Baz has been good, really great at times, and been consistent, especially going into the All-Star break. I know he had a rough start there on Monday, but Pepio has been great. Rasmussen's been great too. And then Boyle's been in his spot start or a few spot starts, and kind of his bulk innings has been really good. So it's not really an area we've been concerned about, but it's one of those things where it's the Rays offense has had struggles right at times, and we talked about that. The bullpen we know has had their struggles, and we talked about that. So it's one of those, okay, well, what happens when the starting pitching starts going bad? We haven't had that happen yet, really, on a consistent basis, right? And this team could be in some serious trouble, especially if the bullpen's not fixed and the offense is performing poorly. And I think to start the second half, we're starting to see what happens when you've got bad starting pitching. Taj is starting against the Orioles to start the second half. 11-1 victory. He did fine in that start. Obviously, the offense carried the team there, and Taj did great. Only gave up 1 run, but then you've got a 4-3 win against the Orioles in the second game, which, yes, that's great, but Rasmussen was not effective. I'm thinking of a different game. I apologize. Littell was good. He had 6 innings, 2 earned runs, so that was a good inning. That was a good game. Then Pepio in the Sunday start. So you got the first 2 starts out the gate, but then Pepio on Sunday gives up 5 earned runs, thanks to 3 home runs. And yeah, he had 8 strikeouts, 1 walk. Still gave you 6 innings, but puts the Rays puts the team in a hole, right? With 6 innings and 5 runs. They end up losing that game. Obviously, Baz on Monday, the White Sox 8-3. That was a poor start. He gave up all 8 earned runs, on some really hard hits, including that 3-run homer to the 9-hole hitter, and another home run in the 5th to kind of put the game out of reach, 8-2. And he just didn't have it at all. Only 4 strikeouts. He got hit a bunch, 8 hits too. The game that the Rays actually won against the White Sox 4-3, Ras wasn't effective, right? He only pitched 4 innings because that 4th inning, he just couldn't find the zone. He got hit around and only ended up going 4. So he didn't give you any length. Not that he's going to go super deep, but he's been known to go 5 or 6. And so now that puts pressure on the bullpen, and potentially it gives you some guys. Uceda had to go 2 innings. Clevenger had to pitch an inning. I guarantee you some of these guys probably would have been available last night had Rasmussen maybe gone a little bit deeper and gotten the team through maybe 6 innings. And then last night's game, Taj speaks for itself. It was awful, awful, awful. And so, that's 4 games in a row that really the pitching staff hasn't come through. And now you go on the road to Cincinnati, who's a good team. They're above 500. And the Yankees in Yankee Stadium, and they got to find it. And this starting staff continues to struggle and to give up home runs, and it's going to get ugly real quick. And so I think this is the first time we've really had to address that. I think you understand what the coaching that the Rays have with Kyle Snyder. You feel good about their ability to get the ship righted, but to right the ship. But it's been a frustrating start against 2 last place teams for the starting pitching staff that had been so good up until the break. I don't know who's going to replace Bradley in the rotation. I think the obvious answer is Joe Boyle. He's pitched on both days that Bradley did. So you think that he would be ready to go in Bradley's turn in the rotation, which would put him starting in Yankee Stadium next week. So that'll be interesting to see finally him maybe getting some extended run while Bradley's down in Durham working on some things and getting his changeup back. So hopefully they can turn around on the road. Like I said, this team has proven that before. When you least expect it, they play better, and that's all we can hope for. Last topic I want to talk about is trade deadline coming up. I think I think we've kind of gone from Rays being true buyers when they were competing for a division title to buy and sell to I think they're trending towards just either doing nothing or selling. I think it's evident after these last few games that the Rays are a borderline wildcard team right now. And with the deadline being where it's at in the season, I don't think Neander can bank on this team performing at a level to where they could compete for a division. I don't think it would be wise for him to pour assets, to trade away assets in the minors or whomever else. Maybe, there had been talk about a guy like Taj Bradley, which, him being optioned, I don't know how that affects his value. I'm sure it's not going to be good for his value. But trading away assets to really, get a big piece for the stretch run here. I think that's highly unlikely. And I think now, especially if the team underperforms going into Cincinnati, New York, and loses, a handful of games and really starts putting themselves, 2.5, 3.5, 4 games out of the wild card. And now you're getting in with all this muddled with all these other teams. I think you're going to see a pretty aggressive sell at the deadline. And honestly, you couldn't blame Neander. It would make sense. You got guys that can replace, Yandy and AAA, not necessarily the production, but you've got guys you can slot into that DH first base role. Pete Fairbanks, I mean, if the team's not going to compete and not be a serious contender for a wild card spot, I'm of the belief you don't really need a strong back end closer. And if you can get value for him, like last year what we saw with Jason Adam, I think you pounce on it. And with his salary going up into the double digits next year with all the escalators, I think the Rays would probably find some good value for a reliever like Fairbanks on the market, even though it's, his year's been up and down, not maybe as dominant as he's been in the past. So I think, you could see him out the door. I think Littell would be gone. I think then you start getting some uncomfortable conversations about Brandon Lau being a trade piece, somebody willing to overpay. I've seen some reports on The Athletic that the Astros are really interested in him. You've got other pieces like Josh Lowe, who, what do you do with him? Christopher Morel is, there's just so many options. I mean, I think you could even make the case for Ha-Seong Kim having a player option next year. Obviously it hasn't gone well. Like, do the Rays really want to have him stick around for a team that probably won't be in the playoffs, especially if things start trending poorly this next week, and having, that player option probably taken because it's not been a great year for him. And now they're on the hook for that salary, or they try to trade him in the offseason. It just, if you can get value for him now, and maybe create more runway for Carson Williams, who's really come on strong in over the summer in AAA, you could probably see them maybe trying to do something like that. Like, there's so many things that they could do. They could essentially listen and get rid of anyone and everyone, or consider a trade for anyone and everyone outside of Junior, Aranda, and Chandler Simpson. Any of the pitchers, maybe. I don't think Pepio makes sense, but you could see the Rays selling at this deadline with the way they've performed. I mean, like I said, in theory, anybody could be available outside of a few players, Aranda, Caminero, Joe Boyle, Chandler Simpson. But anyway, we are going to wrap up at that. I am interested to see how this next week goes. Team could look a lot different going into August if things break poorly. So that'll wrap it up. This has been Rays Rewind. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe to the page, and we will be back next week as we preview the trade deadline even further, especially after the Cincinnati Reds series and going into the Yankee series, and looking forward to seeing how this Rays team performs over the next few days. So thanks for watching, and we will talk to you guys soon.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Rays Rewind with L. Bushman and Drew on YouTube, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.